Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Wednesday, October the 2nd, 2024. On the show tonight, Ken Drysdale, Commissioner on the National Citizens Inquiry, also one of the organizers at Manitoba Stronger Together and the author of the Truth on C-19 report that came out a couple of years ago that brought him to our attention nationally. Ken is also very concerned, as many of us are, regarding the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region Plan 2050 for Winnipeg. This is the Smart City Plan. We have been doing presentations across the province of Manitoba with more scheduled. You can check it all out at manitobastrongertogether.ca. Ken is going to be the guest on the show tonight. Hello, Terry, watching in Grand Prairie. Kathy is here from Bothwell, Ontario. Michael's watching in Brampton. Hello, John. Sherry watching on X in Winnipeg. Hello, Carla in Calgary. Brenda's watching in Kitchener-Waterloo. Am I supposed to say Kitchener-Waterloo? It's either Kitchener-Waterloo or Cambridge. If you say Kitchener-Waterloo, people get mad out there. That's my last impression when I was last there. Ellen is watching from rainy Vancouver Island tonight. Eddie's up in Stonewall. Joycey is in Winnipeg. David is in Gilbert Plains over on Rumble. Who have we got on Rumble tonight? Cindy is watching tonight. Hello, DJ 420, Winston Smith, Esky Dogs, Stump Slayer, Patricia 0711, Susie Q57, Vilma, Paulette Dubuque 123. Watching on Rumble tonight. Wherever you're watching, you guys get the show out to as many people as you possibly can. It's a like and a share on Facebook. It's a repost and a heart on X. It's a smash the like button on YouTube. It's whatever it is on every. Just get it out there. You guys know how to do it. I don't have to hold your hand anymore, do I? Get it out to as many people as you possibly can. Thank you very much. This information is very, very, very important because the Smart City Plan doesn't just affect Winnipeg. As you know, as we've talked about before, the Smart City Plan affects the entire country, the entire Western world, as a matter of fact, but we can only deal with our own communities. That's where we're going to win. So if you can bring this to the attention of the people who live in your community, and again, I've told you how to find it, right? You type in the name of your city in a Google search, the name of your city, and then Plan 2050 next to it. And it will be there, one of the top 2 search results. It'll pop up right on the first page, and you can read all about it. You can read what they plan to do to your city, which is exactly what's going on in Winnipeg. And we have many, many people who are not very happy about that plan here in the Winnipeg metropolitan area. And we're going to talk more about that in just a second. Here's the Manitoba Stronger Together website. We'll show you more on that a little bit later on in the show, which is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com. There's something going around. I spoke to 2 more people this morning who have got something. I don't know what it is, but I'm not feeling very well. Personally, I think it's a cold. But you want to feel better. You want to protect yourself at the same time. And if you have a sore throat, you want to reach for something that actually works, that doesn't have all that poison in it, like these silver lozenges. Reach for Silver Biotics lozenges with vitamin C. This is my favorite flavor. It comes in 3 others, by the way. To quickly cool and soothe your sore throat with an added boost of support for your immune system, each package contains 21 individually wrapped lozenges. And down at the bottom, it tells us more. Soothe and cool your throat while supporting your immune system. Safe and effective alternative to products made with chemicals. Made with cooling organic mint, soothing organic honey, gluten-free, soy-free, nut-free, made with natural and organic ingredients. Does not contain preservatives, dyes, or artificial flavors, but does contain the power of silver-ceutical technology. This and all the other fantastic products are available for you online at CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. If you're looking for a retailer of these awesome products, you can find them in Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, Newfoundland, Ontario, Quebec, and Saskatchewan. There are over 30 all across the country. If you would like to be a retailer of these products, get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at right here, right there. See, at CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Our guest tonight is Ken Drysdale. Ken heads up Manitoba Stronger Together. And Ken, well, I mean, I already gave your history, but for those joining, I mean, Ken, I think this is your 8th appearance on the show tonight. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, you were my number 1 guest. So
Well, and every one of them have been great, great interviews.
I agree. So first, I guess we need to find out if there's been any progress with this Winnipeg municipal plan, this Plan 2050, in terms of the board releasing another public meeting date.
No, the board is required to do two public meetings, and as you know, they did one at the Canad Inn in Winnipeg. I think that was in June or July, and then they attempted a second one in Niverville, and they had allowed for about 250 people, and somewhere between 500 and 1,000 showed up, so they canceled that. And then, and they have to give, by the way, they have to give a 40-day notice for another one, according to the Planning Act, and so they haven't announced a new one yet. Our premier of Manitoba has said that they're looking at a new law or a revision to the law that will allow municipalities to opt out, which is an interesting thing because the legislation itself includes already that the minister can opt different municipalities out at their discretion. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It's an interesting little thing. Maybe our government wasn't aware of that was in the Planning Act already. I don't know.
Well,
But
he said even a month ago, he said, well, you know what? I believe this was one of the nights that you and Ken Lee were on the show where he came out right after we were done. And he said, well, we're going to throw in a Freedom Act, which denotes to me that there was no freedom to begin with. So if you have to legislate freedom, this is not such a good thing at all.
Well, it is interesting. You're absolutely right. He did say that, but like I said, in the Planning Act itself, it says that the minister by regulation can either expand or contract the municipal region, the WMR, the Winnipeg Municipal Region. So they didn't need another act. They didn't need to revise the legislation. The minister only needed to set out a regulation. So I'm not sure what they're doing there. Maybe they're doing more. But we don't know yet. There hasn't been any formal announcements that I'm aware of.
And you know what? Before we get into all of the details that are surrounding this, and I know that you've gone through this plan, and I've heard they're rewriting it. Have you got any verification of that?
We have secondarily got people who went to the WMR office, which, by the way, is very difficult to find in the bottom of a parkade and near Polo Park. And the person that answered the door said that they were in limbo right now to find out what they were going to do. And as you know, as you've alluded to, we've done a lot of work on this plan, and it isn't a plan. It doesn't need to be rewritten. It needs to be thrown out, and we need to start again. And the plan actually started 10 or 15 years ago, and the purpose of it was to streamline the planning process and to make Manitoba more attractive for business. And somehow they've lost their way. They've embraced all this UN propaganda and all kinds of different green things that don't make any sense. And it's amazing how they lost their way. But they really need to throw this thing out, which really isn't a plan. And they need to start from scratch. And that, unfortunately, that includes throwing out the people who are responsible for this thing.
Yeah, but who's that? Do we even know?
Oh man, we've got a list. I'm glad you asked.
When it comes to the board members of the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region, we know who they are. But do they? Because that whole interaction with the chairman of the board, I forget his name now. Michael Moore.
Michael Moore, yeah.
Yeah, he had an interview with the ex-CBC reporter there, Marianne Cloack, a couple of months ago in Niverville. And she said right there, you've got some UN literature right in the plan. And she said, well, he said, have you read the plan? And she said, yes, have you? He said, yes. And then he went and said, now you're just making stuff up to her. And I thought that was interesting because she had it right there. And he wouldn't even look at it. And then he just brushed right by her like she didn't exist. And so I'm thinking to myself, these people either don't know because they haven't read it, or they do know and they don't want to talk about it because it needs to be secret. It can't get out there because if people find out, they're going to reject it, right?
Well, you brought up a really, really interesting point. The people that are responsible I mean, we don't know. I mean, look at I'm looking on my screen right now, and I have a list from the plan itself, from the Plan 2050, that lists the team, the WMR team, former WMR team staff members, and then it's got with support from, and there's a whole list of people there. Who actually wrote this thing? I don't know, but it is so full of United Nations climate change issues. It's full of spirituality issues. It's full of private land use restrictions. It's full of bureaucracy. Uh,
Well, wait a
so
minute. When you say spirituality issues, you're not talking about Christianity,
Oh
right?
no! I'm not. As a matter of fact, there the after our Selker, we did a presentation in Stonewall 2 weeks ago, and I brought this up, and that was one of the main things that the local paper focused on, and what I was talking about was right on page. I've got it on my other screen, so forgive me for looking across at my other screens, but they talk about.
Okay.
All kinds of indigenous spirituality, which of course I respect. Everybody has the right to that. But why would you write in one particular group of people's spirituality and their religious beliefs into a legal document that's supposed to be used to do planning? So, for instance, why isn't it about Jewish people? Why isn't it about Muslim people or Christian people? But there's a whole number of pages in this thing about um, the spiritual beliefs of the First Nations peoples and how that's going to be implemented into the plan, and that's just not appropriate.
Well, it's the cultural Marxism that I've been talking about all week on the show. That's been kind of a running theme. And of course, it's the flavor of the week, the First Nations issues and the truth and reconciliation right now. So I'm sure that's one of the reasons they wrote it in, but also the cultural Marxism in the United States. I'm sure these plans are littered with Black Lives Matter propaganda, the same as up here. It's littered with Every Child Matters propaganda, which is the same propaganda. It's all critical race theory.
Yeah.
So now we've got the UN SDGs in there, the Sustainable Development Goals in this plan, and we've got critical race theory. That's fantastic. I got to know who wrote this thing.
Well, they've got everything in it. They even quote a Joe Biden political motto of "Build Back Better," which, by the way, is not really from Biden. It's from the UN as well. But Biden, not that we're in Canada are following that too closely, but it's interesting. There's a little bit of everything in there.
Did you not see Justin Trudeau? And at the time, the UK Prime Minister was Boris Johnson. They were all talking about Build Back Better, and some genius out there spliced all of them together, saying, "We will build back better." And there was other Western leaders in there saying the exact same thing. How often have we ever seen that in history?
Oh my goodness! It's becoming popular now for talk shows to splice together all the news reports on just about any topic of the day. And what they'll do is they'll show you CBC, CTV, Global, CNN, whoever the heck else it is, and they not only report the same stories the same way, but they use exactly the same words and the same terminology, and that's just not by coincidence. That's been dictated from somewhere.
Well, that's the Trusted News Initiative, and that's a worldwide initiative that's based with the BBC in the UK. Ken, you are very well connected to other people all across the country through your work with the National Citizens Inquiry. Have you talked to other people in other cities about what's going on in their town? Have you heard anything like this?
Yeah, absolutely. And most other places, they're not talking about regions like they are here in Manitoba, but they have implemented similar programs already in different cities across Canada. So you're seeing it in all the provinces. You're seeing it in the small cities and the large cities. Even in Manitoba, you're seeing it in Dauphin and you're seeing it in Brandon. They changed the name though. In Dauphin, it's called the Active Transportation Plan. In the city of Winnipeg, other than the WMR, they also have a master transportation plan that they're going through the process of passing right now. And it's got all kinds of this stuff in it. UN, 15-minute city, you name it, it's got it.
Brandon is calling theirs the Healthy City Plan, the 2050 Healthy City Plan. And so that's what I was talking about off the top of the show, you guys watching, is that you can, type the name of your city or town Because as Ken just pointed out, they're going for towns as small as like Dauphin is 8,000 people. I know they're doing this in Roblin as well. And Roblin is maybe 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So type in the name of your town or city in a Google search and then Plan 2050. And that plan will appear as one of the top 2 searches on the first page when it comes back to you. And from there, you can do what you want with it. Is anybody in other cities fighting back the way Winnipeg has? Because I have to tell you that here it's surprised me the number of people who came out to that first event we had in Stonewall and Niverville. I mean, never mind Stonewall. Niverville, of course, is what set this whole thing off. The response in Stonewall was fantastic, and we're expecting another big one this weekend at Selkirk.
Oh, absolutely. And in other cities, yes, I've been talking to people in Edmonton and Calgary. But what was a little bit of a surprise to me is the pushback that they've been getting in British Columbia. I have a lot of contacts on the island and in the mainland, and there's a lot going on right there. We here in Manitoba seem to have perhaps a wrong understanding of what's going on out there, but there's a lot of people upset. There's a lot of people pushing back. There's an election coming up right away, or going on right now, actually. And there's a lot of activity. Quebec as well. They're very active. The Maritimes. I have to admit that my contacts in Toronto are not great, but in rural Ontario, I'm talking to a number of people, and there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of people pushing back, and a lot of people are being successful in getting these things changed.
Are they doing the same kinds of things that we're doing here, just informing people, or are they actually organizing and going to city hall sessions?
Both. There's a number of people that are organizing presentations at town hall meetings, and it's starting to, and the other interesting thing, Shadow, is the cross-pollination that happened from the Stronger Together conference here in Beausejour in June 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. There's so many of these groups now who came to that, met each other, and now they're talking, and now they're helping each other. And so that was the intent of this conference, and we're really seeing the fruits of it. I mean, even for yourself, I watched your show last night, and you were on with, I believe, someone you met at the conference, and we're seeing that across the country from coast to coast. It's incredible what's going on.
Yep. That has happened, and I made personally a lot of contacts and a lot of great interview connections through the conference. Was there? Because my experience in Stonewall a couple of weekends ago was absolutely positive. There was nobody who came to that event and, in my opinion anyway, left with any kind of negative vibe at all. And I didn't see any sour faces in the crowd. There was 350, almost 400 people at the event in Stonewall. We did see some elected officials from there. I'm not going to name names here, or even the RMs that they represent. Do you think that the presentation made an impact on them?
Oh, I can say positively it did, because I spoke to some of them. And,
okay, so what happened there? I'm curious about that.
They didn't know. They didn't know what was in this thing. Oh. It's an interesting thing in our society now. We're supposedly in the information age, and to my mind, there's never been a time that, at least in my lifetime, that has been so less information. And what I mean by that is, oh, so-and-so's an expert. Oh, okay, I agree. Safe and effective. Oh, it's got to be right. And you're starting to see that change. But up until, I'd say, within the last 18 months to 2 years, people were so quick to just accept what the press and what the propaganda machine was giving them, and then just to get on with the football game or something. But now we're starting to see that change, and it wasn't just everyday Canadians like you and I, but it was their elected representatives. They didn't know. I told the story at the Stonewall meeting that when this whole thing started to become known, what was going on with the WMR, and I told this particular elected representative I knew, about the veto power the city of Winnipeg had on all 18 of the rural municipalities, or 17 of them. They didn't know. And they voted for it.
What were the expressions on their faces when you told them this?
Well, the first expression was I was crazy and didn't know what I was talking about. But then what I did was I copied the clause out of the operational procedures and I sent it to them. And I said, here it is. And then it just kind of went silent.
We can't blame these elected officials for not knowing, because this whole thing has been brought on to us under a big veil of mystery, right? I mean, the way they tried to do the public meetings through the heart of the summer, when people are on vacation and they're not thinking politics, they're not thinking about, they just want to get away, they just want to relax, they want to unwind, they want to spend time with their families. So the first meeting is in June, as you pointed out, and then they tried to do one the very next month, July, dog days of summer in Niverville. They didn't get away with it. But even then, apparently these RM members or council members and mayors, reeves, and just councillors in some cases who are part of the Winnipeg Metro Region Board have been instructed by the chairman of the board to not discuss any of this with their fellow council members. And I find that absolutely astounding. So it's no surprise that these elected officials didn't know, unless they happened to see my show one night or come across ManitobaStrongerTogether.ca, right?
Well, you're right. But, I'm not as, perhaps I'm not as nice a person as you are, but I don't give them a pass. We're paying them and we're giving them our trust to represent us. And they should have been asking questions. And if they didn't know what was going on, they should have come to us and said, listen, this thing's coming down the pipe. I need help. I'm not an elected official and I'm not running for politics. But if I was in the legislature or the RM council or something, I would constantly contact my constituents, because generally speaking, in Manitoba, a rural municipality voting thing is thousands of people, and you can't be expected to know everything. If you think you do, you're a fool. So if you don't understand anything, why wouldn't you go to the people that elected you and said, listen, this thing's coming down. Anybody have expertise on this? Can anybody come in and help me understand this? But not a word, not a peep.
But then still, you get the face, once they do find out, the face that you got at the Stonewall meeting. Well, are you crazy? Like, are you nuts? Is it just you think they can't process that kind of information? Or do they think that you're truly a Fruit Loop?
No, you know what it is they're suffering from the same thing that most of us did suffer from up until a couple of years ago, and that is they trust. So they were told, and I know they were told, because I've spoken to a number of them, and they were told that all 18 municipalities had an equal vote. And that's true. That's absolutely true. But there's another section to it they weren't told. So when you're watching the news and you're hearing reports from our elected representatives, sometimes they don't lie, but they don't tell you the whole truth. And I know Canadians are starting to catch on to that, and I'm guessing our elected representatives are starting to catch on. So I think they just trusted and they didn't go and read it. I was in a town hall meeting not that long ago, and it's kind of funny. There were 60 plus people there, and someone asked the question, "How many people read the WMR?" And a bunch of people in the crowd put up their hands, but the MLA for the region didn't put up his hand. And then he was asked specifically later on, did you read it? Oh yeah, I read it. But there's some good things and there's some bad things. So, I don't want to call anybody a bad name, but I don't think the guy read it.
That's political. Oh yeah, there's some good things and there's some bad things. I specifically like that thing in the middle there where they talk about the thing.
Well, we ran out of time. I was sitting right in the front. I would have said, well, what do you think about, and did something specific. But, there was any point. Everyone knew.
Well, it's all about engagement, too, with these elected officials, right? And you've uncovered some things regarding the last election and civic elections that have happened across the province of Manitoba. And I'm sure it's the same all across the country, where people just don't go and vote. And if they're, what's the turnout, the voter turnout in most of these wards and municipalities, like 30-40%?
Oh, no. You're
not even that high.
You're talking 3 or 4%. And
Come on.
Interestingly enough, and people could look it up on our website. If you go to ManitobaStrongerTogether.ca and you look up WMR 250, it's in the menu at the top. And then you'll come to a whole long bunch of information, and you can click on something there that talks about who are the members of the WMR. It lists the mayor or the reeve, and it lists all the council members for each of the RMs. So there's 18, including the city of Winnipeg. And you know, fully eight of them were elected by acclamation. What acclamation is, it's right at the very top is the menu. Right there in red, it says WMR 250. Just, yeah, right there. And if you click on that, hopefully it'll come up soon. And in any case, okay, there we go. And if you go down a little bit, there's a table of contents. There you go. And it's, I think it's rural municipality representation, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. If you click on that, I think that's.
I'm going to get dizzy from that. That went up way too fast.
So here you go. Now you can slowly move up. And what I've done is I've listed all of the representatives there. And every time you see a one in red, like on the town of Niverville, the mayor, Myron Dick, it's red. He got elected by acclamation, which means nobody ran against him. So nobody voted for him. So they gave him the job. So out of the 18 RMs, fully eight of the RMs, the representatives in the WMR, who are the reeve or the mayor, didn't get any votes. Nobody ran against them. So you can see here all the red. Look at rural municipality Headingley, the mayor, or they sometimes call him mayor or reeve, got in by acclamation. McDonald, acclamation. Richaud, acclamation. Rockwood, acclamation. So folks, if you're not going out and voting, or you're not running to become a representative, what can you expect? I mean, look at look at this one. You had the rural municipality Richaud up there. These people got elected with, look at Steve Bowker, rural municipality of Taché. The mayor got 1,400 votes. Steve Bowker, 230 votes. Look at all the reds. They got no votes, but nobody ran against them. So, folks, if you're not getting up and voting, is it any surprise, and you're not holding these people to account, and you're not reading the bulletins, and you're not going to elections, what do you expect? You know, Shadow, last fall, there was a school board election in Brandon, the city of Brandon. There was Ward 1 and Ward 2. I think Ward 1 was the city of Brandon. There's 35,000 eligible voters. You know how many people voted? 3,000.
Come on.
Absolutely true.
Wow.
So people are screaming about what's going on in their schools, but they don't go out and vote. I'll tell you another one. Even our municipal our provincial election we just had last fall, right? So I analyzed the provincial elections for a couple cycles back. So we had an election in 2023 in October, and then we had a previous election in 2019. Now, this is really interesting because in 2019, 51% of the eligible voters voted. That's in 2019. Then the mass hysteria, the mass madness happened, you know, with the arrows on the grocery store floors, and you have to put a mask on if you're standing up, but you have to have a mask on when you're sitting down unless you're going to the bathroom and it's Tuesday and you had a hamburger on Wednesday. Any case. So all that craziness happened. People lost their lives. People lost their jobs. People lost their families, et cetera, et cetera. We all know what happened. So Manitoba had a provincial election 2023. Do you know how many people voted? 51
less. The same. So people weren't upset or angry. The same people who always voted, and the same people who always don't vote did not.
Yeah, and you know, people say to me, I didn't vote, Ken, because my vote didn't matter. That's crazy. Because in the Manitoba provincial election, it just happened, and I'm going by my memory right now, but there's 57 seats, and fully, I think it was 14 of those seats got elected by a margin of less than 1,000 votes. Each seat represents about 15,000 plus or minus people, and only half of them vote. So that was 7,500 people in each riding that didn't vote, and the seat went for less than 1,000 votes. You know, the MLA and McPhillips in Winnipeg got in by a margin of, I think it was 110 votes.
Right.
So you think your vote doesn't matter? You get together 100 of your friends for a pizza party and then go vote, and you could change the seat.
Yeah, and spread the word to another group of 100 and so on and so on. And, even we can talk about voting all day long and how we get more people to vote. But once the election is over and the government's in place, they need to be held accountable. And I know people that call their MLAs or their MPs or their city councilors or whatever, but it seems to be the same 20 people over and over and over again. After a while, those elected officials just, oh, look, that's crazy Barney from down the street. He's going to bitch and moan about garbage collection again. And they just ignore it after a while. But if they show up at the office one morning and there's 200 emails waiting, 200 different emails waiting for them from their constituents, all pissed off about something, you can bet that elected official is going to start to sweat a little bit, right?
Well, you look at, a case in point. So the Winnipeg metropolitan region, I believe it has about 820,000 people living in it, right? 820,000. So
920.
So in Niverville, when they had the public meeting on the WMR, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people showed up. Let's say it was 1,000. So immediately the premier's on the air and he's talking about changing the law and da 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 da. That's 1,000 out of 900,000, 850,000 people. So my point on this is this: it doesn't take a lot. What's the percentage on 1,000 out of 900,000? It's like 1/10 of 1%, something like that. It doesn't take 300,000 people to go. It takes a very small portion of people to go, and it makes a difference.
It does make a difference. And I'll tell you the formula that politicians used, it's the same one we used to use in radio. If you have 100 or 1,000 people who call you because they want to take part in the contest and win this contest, you can bet for every person that called you, there's another 100 people who wanted to but couldn't get through or got wrapped up or distracted by something else.
Yeah.
So if 1,000 people show up and each one of those people represents 100, now you're starting to put some serious pressure on government officials. And you're right. That's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, the premier's on the air and the elected officials are panicking and worrying, and they cancel things. And, that's the power of the people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it amazes me how many people just don't want to get off their asses, even if they're pissed off and they know what's going on.
Well,
It's crazy.
You're absolutely right. I see it every single day. This morning, I'll give you an example. Folks may or may not know that I was the chairman of the National Citizens Inquiry, and we wrote that 5,400 page report and submitted it last November. And by the way, there's a new supplemental report coming out in about 2 weeks. So stay tuned, folks. Some really interesting new information. But so I get an email, and God bless these people. They get these emails all the time. Well, Mr. Drysdale, I don't know you, but I've got this question about blah, 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 blah. And so I send them an answer. I do some research on my own, look at the report. And I say, well, Peter McCullough testified to this, and Dr. Laura Braden testified to this, blah, blah. And you can look up their thing and blah, blah, blah. And then I get an email back. Can you send me the video clips? You mean to tell me you can't look up the video clip? You're that interested? I've given you the names, but you can't go into it. You got to ask. And you know what? God bless them. God bless them. They're looking it up, and I'll do my best. But I get stuff like that all the time. Me
too. And we would need a staff of 100 each to be able to handle all of the requests we get for video clips and whatnot. When you guys can simply go on and do a search on your own, if you're that interested and that motivated and you want to know what's going on, it's just a simple matter of, coming here, coming to this show, watching this show, or going, if you want to find it right now, go on your own and search around the internet. You can find things. Even with the restrictions and the censorship these days, you can still find things. What I do recommend is, if you're really looking for actual information, not to use Google, because they are downgrading anything that is real out there. Ken, let's talk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just one issue on that. I know folks don't like this. It's a dirty word. But in order to help folks find this kind of stuff, I have been writing like mad GPT AI programs for them. For instance, when I talk about the NCI report, it's 5,400 pages long. That people aren't even going to look at it. But I wrote a GPT. It's free. If you go to Chat GPT and you go to the GPT store, you can find it's the NCI assistant. And you can ask it anything, and it will answer. You know, when we were dry testing it, Teresa Buckley asked it, "What color shirt was Ken Drysdale wearing in Truro, Nova Scotia?" And it answered it, and it was correct. So, folks, I'm doing my best to bring those things forward. And when I'm programming those, they're only using the database of information I'm giving it. Like for the NCI, it was the NCI report. I will be doing that with the 2050 plan shortly. So I will have a GPT available for it. You don't have to take a look at my presentation or the information that's available on the Manitoba Stronger website. You can actually ask it yourself and then verify the answers.
You guys got to go to manitobastrongertogether.ca. There are tons of information on that website, not just about the WMR, but all kinds of video. You put out the video from the Stonewall event, all of it, Ken. People were asking me, I think a couple of days after the event, well, how come you didn't live stream it? I deserve to see it. You say, yeah, I get that you deserve to see it, but if we were live streaming it, would you have come?
Exactly. And
it's like the old blackout with the CFL, right? If you don't sell the game out, I'm sorry, but it's not going to be on TV because we want your asses in the seats at the event. Because yes, these are community events, yes, and they are informative. But one of the things about these events is that you get all kinds of like-minded people in the same room, 400, 300, 500 people in the same room who all see things clearly. And you can talk to each other.
Yeah.
And it's just that sense of togetherness and community in a room like that. And that's one of the big rushes I get out of each one of those things I do. Sure, you can watch it on the screen. Our faces are this big on the screen for you guys, and that's fine. If you can't make it, we totally understand. But if you have the time and you have the means to come out, even we had people driving in from 2.5 hours away a couple of Saturdays ago. If you have the time and you have the means to come, join us. You will not regret it.
Yeah, it's not just about information. That was one of the things, that was one of the tools they used against us during the whole COVID business. They isolated us. They wanted us on our screens, and then they controlled the screens. They wanted us not to have human-to-human interface. So you're right, Shadow. We made a conscious decision not to live stream it because we wanted people in that room breathing the same air, talking to each other, laughing, and meeting new people. It's like when you're in church and they say, all right, everybody, turn around and say hello to the person. That's what we want. We want to build community. We don't want to tear. The government has been trying to tear us apart for decades. Diversity is our strength, but this group hates that group and this group hates that group. I'm 66 years old, and I've traveled this country up and down and sideways and backwards and forwards. And to be honest, I have never met somebody who is blatantly racist or hates somebody for the fact that they're Polish or they're Catholic or they're this or they're that. That fantasy only lives in the government's sick mind, and it's meant to separate you. So that's what we're trying to do. Get everybody in a room. You see that we're humans. We're worried about our children. We're worried about filling the gas tank. We're worried about whether we're going to be cold this winter. You don't get that from a screen, folks. You get that by being in the room with them, breathing the same air, laughing at the same jokes, or maybe not.
Depending on your sensibilities, I suppose. We have another one coming up this weekend in Selkirk. This is going to be at the Selkirk Rec Center, and the capacity of this one is like 400 or 500. Am I right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and it's from 1 to 4.
Right.
And we're we've got a presentation that I've got a second screen here. I'm just looking at it. The presentation is a slideshow presentation. It's 162 pages, and we know we're not going to get through all of that, folks. We're going to get through about a dozen of them.
That's because Ken's going to tell folksy down-home stories, though.
Even if I didn't, I'd never get through.
And then he'll stop every 10 minutes and say, geez, I guess I should get back to the actual presentation. I haven't even got to the presentation yet.
Hey, I'm not a professional presenter. I'm not like you. I mean,
You have got a folksy charm about you that people like. And I was captivated by your whole presentation. I sat and watched the whole thing and I went, wow, he's good. You capture people's attention. And that's something that, we need that. We need more people to be able to get out, reach out to people and make them understand what's going on. Even, and I'm talking to you guys watching this now, even if you're sitting talking amongst friends in your garage having a beer one night and something like this comes up, you need to arm yourself with the information so that you can speak authoritatively about what's going on. You can't just go, what? Yeah. Because if you do, you sound like Tim Walz in that vice presidential debate last night.
That was a great one. I love that one. I watched that one. Yeah, folks, it's interesting. I wrote a piece 2 or 3 days ago about fear. And I was telling people, don't be afraid. When you leave idiots like me standing up by ourselves in the wind, we're going to get blown away. But if all of you stand up with us, we will not. And I sent that out on social media, and I don't normally respond to a lot of folks on these things. But somebody said to me, "What do you mean you're not supposed to be afraid? All you ever talk about is things that make me afraid." And I thought about that, and I thought, you should not be afraid of the truth. What you should be afraid of is lies and deceit and the things that are going on in our world, because almost everything you look at is a lie. You should never be afraid of standing up for the truth, because the consequence of you not standing up is horrific. And so I didn't respond to this person, but I thought it was an interesting interpretation that I was telling people not to be afraid, but the things I had been talking about made this person afraid. So they didn't get the fundamental basis of what I was talking about, and that is stand up. Don't be afraid. And if you stand together, there's nothing to be afraid about. The powers of evil are like predators in the wild. They look for the individual. They look for the weak. They're not going to attack the herd.
That's absolutely true. Some people still have a problem just diving in, right? I mean, they're sitting there right now. And I've seen, like, in the June conference, I saw, I'm going to say 20 people that I hadn't seen in years who told me they'd been watching my show for the last 4 years and agree with everything that I say. And I said, well, thanks. But how come I haven't seen you at any of the other events? I just, work. I don't want those people to know that I'm here. And I said, what are you here to do? What are you doing here now? So I kind of got over that. Basically, it's like wading in to cold water up to your waist, and you have that moment where you make the decision. I'm either going to go in or I'm going to turn around and go back.
Yeah. And the other thing that cripples people is they say to themselves, I can't stand up and talk. I can't give those speeches. I don't have the computer skills to do this or that or the other thing. And as you know, Shadow, I know you're gonna laugh at me here, but Manitoba Stronger Together has a tradition, and that tradition is cinnamon buns. What the hell am I talking about? When we go to Manitoba Stronger has an event, people bring homemade cinnamon buns, and the reason for that is that people, when we first started up and we did, I think 14 communities last fall, people come up to me and it was always like, what can I do? I don't know how to run a computer and I can't speak in public. And I looked at this person and I said, I bet you can make cinnamon buns. And she thought I was crazy. And I said, you know what? If your skill is making cinnamon buns, then next time we come to town, you let everybody know that you're going to bring your homemade cinnamon buns. And I bet you we double the attendance because of that. And I based that idea. It wasn't my idea. It's the reinterpretation of the loaves and the fishes from the Bible. I mean, did anybody ever ask who packed the lunch? We know what the kid did. The kid brought the fishes and the loaves. We know what Jesus did. He multiplied them. But who made that lunch in the first place? Maybe that's what you should be doing. Maybe you show up and you just maybe arrange chairs. Maybe you show up and you take a brochure. Maybe when you're in the line at Safeways or Costco and you say to the person in front of you, hey, I keep hearing about this WMR. Do you know what it is? Maybe that's what you do. Maybe you bring cinnamon buns. Oh, by the way, somebody in Beausejour brought Vina Tartar one time.
I'll tell you what, if somebody brings cinnamon buns to the Selkirk event, we'll give them away. We'll stand up in front of the crowd and we'll say, all right, we've got Bonnie's cinnamon buns here. And we've put a yellow card under 15 chairs in the audience. If you have a yellow card under your chair, come on up and get your cinnamon bun.
You know,
What about that?
But it's true. You might not have, not everybody is the quarterback.
No.
Not everybody's a quarterback. Somebody scrapes the ice at the end of the game. Somebody plays defense. Somebody is picking up the pucks. Someone's going and getting mouth guards. It doesn't come together unless everybody does their job. So please, folks, don't disqualify yourself because you're not the quarterback. The quarterback's useless without the rest of the team behind them. And
absolutely. And the other thing is, if you come to me or Ken at one of these events, or for that matter, if you're watching in Alberta or Ontario and you know of an event that you can go to that's kind of along the same lines, and you walk up to the organizer of that event and you ask, is there anything I can do? And that person says, no, we're covered right now. Find something you can do.
yeah,
I mean, make something up. I mean, you could take what you're good at, like Ken said, making cinnamon buns or whatever it is. Maybe it's you're a wizard with home fries. It doesn't matter, right? And it doesn't have to be making food.
no.
It can be whatever you're good at, right? But just contribute something if you can.
Well, what? I'll tell you
even
another
if it's just a hearty laugh. A hearty laugh is always good too.
I'll tell you another one. I got another email this morning. It was a lady I haven't met, and she said to me, Mr. Drysdale, I went through your slide presentation and I'm halfway through, and there's this spelling mistake, and this "to" should have been an "in," and this "the" should have been a whatever. And that was what that person contributed, and she's finishing it tonight. But maybe that's what you do. And this lady took it upon herself, and she sent me, I think, about a dozen or so different little typos and stuff for me to fix. Wonderful. If that's your expertise, God bless you. Stand up.
And I'll tell you something else about these events, wherever they happen to be. When Ken and I can't speak for you, Ken, I'll speak for me. When I'm standing up in front of you guys, I got a microphone in my hand and I'm talking to you about something pretty important. And I'm watching you just like you're watching me. This is not a one-way street. This is a two-way street of engagement. And I'm looking at your faces and I'm seeing that you're engaged. Or if you're not, I will try to bring you into that. My goal is to make sure that everybody is there learning stuff and growing, but also feeling a part of it, right? So if I've had many people email me and say, I saw you at the event last week and you were busy talking to somebody, so I didn't want to interrupt you. What I always say to that is, you should have interrupted me. I will always have time. If I have to stick around for 2 hours after, it doesn't matter to me. Might matter to my ride, but it doesn't matter to me because I want to make sure that we all have the chance to speak to each other face to face. And it's such a rare occurrence that when it does happen, you got to take advantage of it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And those of us who've ever been to a live concert knows that there's a difference between sitting on the floor at home listening to your record or going to a live concert. It feeds back and forth when the performer's on stage telling stuff and they're watching you and they're going to react to the way that you're reacting to them. And so you get this, not just this community benefit, but you also help in the presentation and you help to hone the skills of the presenter and you gain from that too. So I guess I'm going a little bit back to, well, why didn't you live stream it or so on and so forth? We have provided the video. But it's not the same, folks. It's not the same as being in the room, interacting as human beings, not as computer junkies, but as human beings, getting to know what that is again. Because if a lot of us have forgotten, a lot of us spent 2.5, 3 years locked down, couldn't see your mama, couldn't see your dad. Some of you didn't even see your spouse. I remember, do you remember that thing that Fauci put out about how you're supposed to, let's not get into that about your spouse.
Theresa Tam was talking about that too, wasn't she?
Well, I could see that with Theresa Tam. Sorry about that, Theresa.
But I'm looking right now, and you can see them too, Ken. All the comments that are zipping past here, and you guys it's not the same, right? I mean, you're writing comments and you're interacting with each other remotely, virtually. But being able to do it in person is a whole other thing. So we want to see you in Selkirk this coming Saturday from 1 until 4 o'clock. We've expanded the time last weekend or the weekend before last. I think it was a 2.5 hour presentation. So this one will be full time for you. We'll even have an intermission, right? So people can get up and go pee.
Well, we tell people just get up and go, because if we stop, we're going to lose an hour. And
that's right.
Yeah.
We can't do that. So yeah, we want you guys to come out 1 to 4, Selkirk Rec Center this Saturday. Ken Lee is going to be there. Ken and Rosalie Drysdale are going to be there. I will be there as well. And it's going to be a great presentation. But more than that, it will be all about community and engagement and talking to each other. And that to me is the most beautiful thing. Ken, thank you for coming on tonight, man. I'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you. It was always a pleasure.
Always. And for more information, you guys, you can go to manitobastrongertogether.ca, manitobastrongertogether.ca, and immerse yourself in the information that Ken has spent time putting together. So one of the things about Ken is when he goes on one of these binges, one of these information binges, he sits there for hours at a time in front of his computer, just inputting this information to make it available for you. Pretty much a one-stop shop. So again, manitobastrongertogether.ca. I still have some major truth bombs to drop for you guys tonight. I hadn't seen this video before, and it came out a year ago. It's RFK Jr. talking about BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and how they want to pretty much own all of the real estate in the United States, and I would imagine in Canada too, by what year? 2030. Let's watch this.
BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which own collectively, they own each other, so it's really one giant corporation, but they also own 89% of the S&P 500. They own everything. They've now decided to buy every single family home in America. So if they stay on the current trajectory, they will own 60% of the homes in this country, single family homes, by 2030. They literally are trying to buy everything. And the head of it, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is on the board of the World Economic Forum. And what they've said, we want this great reset, which is you will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, they're on their way to making sure that we don't own anything. So you all probably have heard of people who are about to buy a home, and somebody comes in at the last minute with a cash or offer and snatches it out of the market.
Right.
And it's usually an LLC with an ambiguous name. But if you trace that up, you'll find it's owned by BlackRock.
Wow.
You will own nothing and be happy. Remember that video I played for you last night when the CBC reporter was talking to those First Nations ladies and she was saying, so how's Trudeau been for you? Has he been better than Harper? And they just freaked out on her for no good reason. And that was that great example I gave you of cultural Marxism. I think if I was their cultural Marxism coach, I would have said, you came on a bit too strong, a bit too quick there. You probably should have waited for another reporter, maybe a Rebel News reporter, somebody from True North, who was going to ask you an actual logical question before you started freaking out on them. Those people at the end, the First Nations lady, you colonizers, you settlers, remember? Well, there's a new poll out, and the poll says that most Canadians, as you can see, disagree with being called settlers. And I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because we were born here. This is where I was born. This is where I grew up. This is where I still live. I do not feel like a settler. In the world of academia, the term settlers has become commonplace when discussing people of European descent. However, a new poll has found that most Canadians don't agree with it. A survey commissioned by the Association of Canadian Studies revealed a disconnect between academics and the general public. And, by the way, as Ken was just pointing out, this disconnect also goes with the media and the government. The Leger poll found that 47% of Canadians disagree with the term settler as a descriptor, and 30% were completely unaware of the term altogether. That's how clued out so many people are. They don't vote, they don't keep up on current affairs, and maybe that's a good thing. Ignorance is bliss, right? This prompted researchers to note that it's reasonably safe to conclude that the 30% simply don't understand the notion of settler colonialism, or maybe it's that they don't care. President and CEO of the Association of Canadian Studies, Jack Jedwab, said the term is primarily used by those who perceive Canada's past and present through a colonial lens, like those who believe in critical race theory and have been indoctrinated to that. They therefore define Canadians as either Indigenous or as settler colonists, said Jedwab. The poll ultimately found that fewer than 1 in 4 Canadians see themselves as a settler. Jedwab said that most Canadians reject the us and them labeling. It's indicative of a widening gap between the academy and the public at large. That gap risks undercutting efforts at reconciliation as it fails to capture the diversity of the Indigenous and non-Indigenous persons. How about this? And this is very simple. Like Rocky Balboa said at the end of Rocky IV after he laid a smackdown on Ivan Drago, why can't we all just get along? I don't give a rat's ass what color your skin is, man. Doesn't matter to me. Liberal corruption. This is the former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Andrew Scheer. Listen to this. It's absolutely astounding.
After 9 years, Justin Trudeau has shown that he's not worth the cost or the corruption. The Speaker has just recently ruled that all House business, all government business must be put aside while members of Parliament consider Liberal corruption. First, we had the case of the Green Slush Fund, the SDTC fund, where the Auditor General found over $330 million funneled to Liberal insiders' own businesses. She found massive conflicts of interest. Basically, these Liberal appointed board members who made the decision as to which companies got money, taxpayers' money, from this fund, were funneling that money to their own businesses or to the businesses of their close friends. So the Auditor General has blown the whistle on that, yet the government refuses to hand over the documents to the RCMP. The House of Commons passed a production order demanding that all documents, all information that the Auditor General uncovered, plus any documents that might exist in any government department related to this scandal, be handed over to the RCMP. The government is refusing, and as a result, the House will be seized with this corruption matter until they hand over the documents. And then we have the case of the other Randy, where a senior Trudeau minister is alleged to have been sitting around the cabinet table while also involved in his own business's affairs. His business partner was summoned before a committee and refused to disclose all the information, refused to name who the other Randy is, refused to hand over all the documents and answer the questions that were put to him. And as a result, the House is seized with that motion as well. So what we're saying today is that the government will not be able to, the House will be staying on these corruption matters until the Liberals hand over all the documents to the RCMP. While Canadians are suffering with the cost of living crisis that Justin Trudeau caused with his runaway inflation, while millions of Canadians are visiting a food bank for the first time and young Canadians are giving up on the dream of home ownership as housing costs have doubled under the NDP Liberal government, it's clear once again that the Liberals will always stop and enrich their friends while they impoverish Canadians.
Like, what's this going to look like, and how long is this going to go on?
So the Speaker has ruled that the parliamentary that Parliament's rules were broken in this Liberal cover-up. The House of Commons demanded these documents be sent to the RCMP so that the RCMP can determine whether or not there are criminal charges warranted because of this corruption. The government refused to comply with this long-standing power that Parliament has to hold governments to account. And by doing so, the Speaker has now ruled that all government business must be put aside until the House deals with this corruption motion. It's really up to the government to determine how long that will take. but it's clear that they're willing to go to extreme lengths to cover up their corruption, that they're willing to put the business of Parliament off to the side just to protect Liberal insiders. Liberal-friendly appointees to this board funneled money to their own companies. That's taxpayers' money. And while Canadians are paying higher carbon taxes, higher prices at the grocery store, higher mortgage costs with high interest rates, Liberal insiders stopped and enriched themselves. It's never been so good to be a Liberal insider. It's never been so tough to be a hardworking Canadian.
No question period, no anything.
This would be question period, but as to the business that the House debates every day, the Speaker has ruled that these corruption motions must be dealt with before any other business can be done. That's also a question for the government. They control when they assign days, and they control when the House can move on by transmitting the documents to the RC.
So the business of our country is going to be halted until the Liberal government either hands over these documents they've been ordered to hand over, or they prorogue Parliament, possibly. Remember we talked about that last night? So that's one of Trudeau's options. He prorogues Parliament, so everything stops, because it's been a bad 2 years for Trudeau. Let's be honest. He's been sinking in the polls for the past 2 years, but in the last month, things have gotten really grim. Bad polling numbers, all of these corruption reports coming out from the committees that were done by hardworking MPs over the summer. They were in Ottawa, like questioning these witnesses, like relentlessly. And we've got the results of it now, which has caused a suspension nearly of Parliament, of the business of government, of the business of this country. They cannot conduct business, the business of you and me, until the Liberals capitulate and hand over these documents so the RCMP can investigate them. We're talking about hundreds of millions of your dollars, my dollars, going to Liberal insiders, which is completely unacceptable. Trudeau government defies Parliament, refuses to surrender SDTC documents, finds the Speaker of the House. And the Speaker of the House, by the way, Greg Fergus, he's a Liberal. There they are. There's Fergus and Trudeau sitting having a laugh in Trudeau's office. Speaker Greg Fergus ruled that the Trudeau government defied the authority of Parliament by refusing to hand over documents pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada and its gross misconduct. So something's going to boil over. Something's going to happen in the next couple of days, maybe the next week and a half. Whether it's proroguing of Parliament, whether it's Trudeau stepping down, something is going to happen. This is serious. This is worse than SNC-Lavalin. This is bad. Worse than the WE scandal, worse than all of the other terrible scandals the Trudeau government's been involved in. And they've been involved in more scandals than any government in Canadian history. I want to take you back a couple of years to a teacher called Peter Vlaming. I believe he's from Virginia. He's a French teacher. And Peter was fired for not using the proper pronouns of one of his students.
He was a teacher in West Point in a school district in Virginia who was fired 4 years ago for refusing to use pronouns that contradicted with the student's biological sex. This morning, Peter's case was heard in front of the Virginia Supreme Court. The result of this case, his case, could affect this issue statewide, maybe even nationally. Let's bring in former French teacher Peter Vlaming and Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel Chris Schwendebel. Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. Very quickly, tell our audience the story. I've read it. It's very, very compelling. You're a French teacher. You didn't want to use pronouns that didn't apply to the person's biological sex. Go for it.
Sure. I had a student second year, actually third year in my class, going up the levels in French. A student I really liked she decided that she was adopting a male identity, and with a new male name that I adopted as well, adopted a new male name. And I explained to my administration how I was approaching this transition. I explained that, yes, I'm using her new name and I'm avoiding feminine pronouns in her presence in the classroom. I'm not going to provoke her. She can believe how she wants. However, I'm not going to adopt her newfound ideology, and use male pronouns to refer to her. I'm just going to use her new name, which in the classroom setting is actually quite easy, because I say to my student, "Hi, how are you doing?" I don't say, "Hi, how is she doing?" if you're talking directly to someone.
Right.
And using their name when you're referring to them in their presence is also more polite than pronouns. So my administration said, no, you must pronounce male pronouns even when there are no students present when you're referring to this student.
It's amazing. This is absolutely amazing, Peter.
Yeah.
They're basically forcing you to lie.
True.
Yeah, and so let me bring in the lawyer. We're bringing the lawyer. Let's talk.
We don't need to hear from the lawyer. But what we do know is that Peter Vlaming was fired for this about 2 years ago. But today, some very good news for Peter. Virginia teacher fired for misgendering trans student wins $575,000 payout from the school board. Well, isn't that something? A Virginia school board has agreed to a $575,000 settlement for this guy, Peter Vlaming, former high school teacher, terminated for refusing to use transgender students' preferred pronouns. So what happened to this guy was he went to court, local court in Virginia. They threw the case out without really reviewing it. So it wound up in the hands of the Supreme Court of that state. And they said, no, we want to hear this case. Let's hear this case. And then when all was said and done, they ruled in favor of Mr. Vlaming and gave him $575,000, which I think is absolutely outstanding. Meanwhile, in Canada, from our friend Sean Ricard, he says, "Good morning. I'd like you to meet Ed Cunningham. Ed is a professional troll, heckler, and an unhinged woke trans rights activist. He's also the husband of Emma Cunningham, another radical woke activist who just happens to sit on the board as a trustee with the Durham District School Board. Ed and his wife are both members of the Alphabet Mafia and have made it their mission in life to stalk, viciously attack, demonize, and defame anyone who doesn't share their cult-like beliefs, especially Pickering City Councilor Lisa Robinson, who they attack both online and in person simply because her opinions and moral compass don't align with theirs. Durham District School Board, I'd like to hear how you feel about your board members acting in this manner and participating in such hostile, aggressive, and confrontational behavior and activities. Here's a video of Mr. Cunningham.
You can scan the QR code. You can scan the QR code. It's in the news.
School board member. This guy was voted into that position. This is what Ken and I were talking about earlier, you guys. Come on. We can't let people look at this. Here's another from Clayton Demain on X. Police break up an altercation after LGBTQ counter protesters, including these Cunninghams, took parental rights activist signs outside the DDSBS schools HQ Friday. A counter protester accuses protesters of being white supremacists and Nazis for opposing Soji in schools. Okay, so you see the police getting involved there, and the police seem to be keeping the peace in that situation. But how many times have we heard city and town councils or school board meetings get kind of raucous, but not really? I mean, we're talking about people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're going out and they're obviously not happy, but they're not threatening any violent behavior. Then again, these people, these wokeists, believe that violence is words and actions and feelings, even though they stand there yelling into megaphones calling people Nazis. But I digress. They call the police, and the police will threaten to arrest any of the protesters, meaning people like us, who want to ask questions about why this alphabet curriculum is in our public schools in the first place. and why these books are in these school libraries, public libraries, funded by you and me. And you know the books I'm talking about. And nobody is talking about banning these books, by the way. It's a simple matter of age appropriateness. It's like a kid can't walk into a 7-Eleven and buy a copy of, what's a dirty book? You see what I'm getting at. So are the cops working with these radical sex activists? Tamara Ugolini of Rebel News dove into that, and here's what she found.
PFLAG pressured Ontario police to arrest parental rights protesters ahead of the Million March for Children, and we filed for police records to find out for sure. After a year-long wait, the OPP finally responded, but they never took an extension to the original filing, which is an obvious breach of the law. And how exactly did it take them an entire year to respond the way that they did? Let's dig in. Last year, Rebel News was tipped off that the radical sex activists at PFLAG were pressuring police forces across Ontario to arrest parental rights protesters ahead of the Million March for Children, which saw a large number of parents in the street protesting in September 2023 all across the country. For context, PFLAG is a national nonprofit organization that describes itself as a group of parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays to advance the rights of the alphabet soup mafia through a network of advocacy, education, and peer support. According to charity data, they do this work by giving out posters and brochures to schools, health authorities, community centers, and social service agencies. PFLAG also participates in workshops, public forums, and partnerships to promote awareness and education on diversity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Now, it was said that ahead of last year's first ever Million March for Children, organized by parents concerned about the sexually explicit and, quite frankly, pornographic content and radical sexual indoctrination of children in publicly funded schools, PFLAG allegedly requested not only the arrest of said protesters, but also debriefings after the protest to review police footage with them and have them explain why certain protesters weren't arrested to see if they could lay charges. We know that this isn't out of the realm of possibility with once respected institutions and organizations like the military hosting drag queen bingo and York Regional Police partaking in drag and donuts. The obsession with men cross-dressing and appropriating hyper-sexualized caricatures of women as some sort of beacon of inclusivity and tolerance is, well, bizarre, to say the least.
Drag and donuts in the York Regional Police Station.
In fact, it's worth noting here that it's typically the trans activists that become unhinged at these events, swarming peaceful protesters with deafening whistles and other strange sound devices, utilizing Antifa-adjacent tactics that are more reminiscent of fascism than liberty to intimidate those with different views and bully them into silence. The anonymous tipster did say that one particular force with the Greater Toronto Area did not comply with this outlandish request, but that's not to say that others followed suit. So we filed an access to information request to find out, which you can support and stay up to date with at our exclusive investigations website, rebelinvestigates.com. The request was for all communication between PFLAG and Toronto Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police regarding parental rights protests, drag events, and the Million March for Children from May until September last year. Now, it's been a year, and we finally received a response back. But not only did the OPP never take an extension as required by law, it took them a year to tell us that no records existed. The response reads, "Please be advised that access to the requested records cannot be granted as the information does not exist. Experienced staff familiar with the record holdings of the ministry conducted a records search. No responsive records were located." How did it take them an entire year to come back with no records response? It's absurd. So while the OPP breached the law by not responding to this request for records for an entire year without taking an extension, pursuing a complaint would likely only result in the commissioner acknowledging this breach after a lengthy process and additional expenses and fees to complain. However, we are filing for additional records in certain jurisdictions and more local police forces that are known to have cozy relationships with PFLAG chapter leaders. So please stay tuned for that and support this kind of work at rebelinvestigates.com, because liaising with radical activists undermines the credibility and independence of policing and deserves to be exposed.
You know about that hurricane down in the States, right? How it cut a swath of destruction through North Carolina, other states on the eastern seaboard. Well, Georgia included. Kamala Harris is down in Georgia earlier today to announce that FEMA, apparently Joe Biden said yesterday that FEMA is broke and doesn't have enough money to cover this whole disaster, doesn't have enough money to cover hurricane season, even though it comes every year. FEMA will be providing federal relief in the form of $750, a one-time payment to those affected by Hurricane Helene. And here is Kamala.
And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met. And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met. And the federal relief and assistance that we have been
$750 for your immediate needs. What can you get these days for $50? Sorry, $750. Can you pay your rent with that? No, probably not. I guess you can get some groceries. Last you a couple of weeks, maybe, depending on the size of your family. Maybe you can get some gas for your car. It's not going to last long, though. So thanks, Kamala. Very generous. We've lost everything, by the way. Everything. Everything. You know, insurance won't pay because it's a natural disaster. All very interesting what's going on down there. FEMA is supposed to be the go-to agency for this. But because it's woke now and broke now, get woke, go broke. I guess those people are just on their own, except for that $750. You know that that's not going to play well for her in the upcoming election. There's more Diddy stuff to get into tonight, and I will do that on the extension for all access pass holders at shadowdavis.com in just a couple of minutes. For those of you not joining, and there's a lot of stuff, and it's just as good as the stuff we put on last night. Names, baby, names. We're going to cover this in the extension on shadowdavis.com. If you want to join, become an all-access member, go to shadowdavis.com. Now join, and I'll see you there in 2 minutes. If not, I'll catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. Love you all. Appreciate you all. Bye for now.